Hello and welcome to a little introduction of triangles and trigonometry. This is going to be building up to sine, cosine, tangent, cotangent, cosecant, and secant. But in this first video, we are just going to be talking about right triangles a little bit. So in this first three questions, it's just trying to find the third side. So if you have two sides of a right triangle, do you or do you not remember how to find the third side? The answer is the Pythagorean Theorem. So do you remember the Pythagorean Theorem? A squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we're going to be using this. Here, the only thing you have to remember is what a, b, and c are. And it's very important to remember that the hypotenuse is considered c. The other sides don't really matter which one you do, a and b, so I'll just call this and that a and that b. And what you would do is you would do a squared, so 5 squared, plus b squared, which we don't know, is equal to c squared, which is 13 squared. And 5 squared is equal to 25, b squared is b squared, 13 squared is 169. So you'd have this little equation here, you would solve for b. So you'd subtract 25, that's going to be 144 equals b squared. And then you square root both sides and you would get b is equal to 12. So b is equal to 12 and that's the answer. Now technically back in the day, if you square root both sides, you put plus or minus in front of the answer. But because we're talking about distances, distances are always positive. So that's going to be as far as it goes, just positive 12. Over here, we're going to do the same thing. This side will be a, this side will be b, and the hypotenuse is always c. Always remember the hypotenuse is c. I'll write a little tiny note for myself because I like taking notes. Hypotenuse is always c. So I would do 1 squared plus 2 squared equals c squared, which is 1 plus 4 equals c squared, which is 5 equals c squared. This time when you square root both sides, you just get the square root of 5. There is no whole number square root of 5. You can't like do a number tree and simplify it. So the answer is just going to be the square root of 5. So go ahead if you want, pause the video and see if you can get C. If not, I'm about to do it, but I suggest pausing it and trying it. So here, C is once again the hypotenuse that we don't know. So this will be A and B. So we'll have 5 squared plus 10 squared equals c squared, which is 25 plus 100 equals c squared. So you get 125 equals c squared, which when you square root, you get the square root of 125. So if you wrote the square root of 125, you were mostly correct. This one, it turns out you can actually simplify. It's 5 times 25, which is 5 times 5, which means if you simplify it, you'd have a pair of 5 and a leftover 5. So super smarty pants answer is 5 root 5. At least you did it correctly, is the square root of 125. Moving onward, you are going to want to simplify it though. That does come in handy when we do SOHCAHTOA, sine, cosine, tangent stuff. So just keep that in mind. Next up is labeling as opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. In each of these questions, I wrote an angle, and you're just supposed to write, I'll just do O for opposite, A for adjacent, or H for hypotenuse, capital letters. So the easiest thing to do is always do hypotenuse first. Once again, I'm going to write some notes, because I like notes. Identify the hypotenuse first. And I don't even know if I'm spelling hypotenuse wrong. I don't write it wrong. But that's what I'm going to do. Hypotenuse first. Once I find the hypotenuse, like in A, it looks like this is the hypotenuse, so I'll label it H. After that, I tend to do adjacent. These are just recommendations, they're not necessary, but I like to do adjacent second. Because once you find the hypotenuse, the adjacent is the other one that's next to the angle, because the hypotenuse is always attached to it, and the adjacent's the other one attached to it. So since I already used up this one for H, this one's got to be adjacent. In case you didn't know, that's what adjacent means. It means next to. If two things are adjacent, they're next to each other. And finally, opposite is going to be over there. So it's just the one that's left. Or if you prefer, you could do opposite first. It doesn't matter. If this is the angle, if you go straight across from the angle, that would be the opposite. That's another way to think about it. Here's the angle. On the opposite side of the angle is opposite. Hypotenuse is here because the hypotenuse is always straight across from the right angle. Just like here, hypotenuse was straight across from the right angle. And that's the adjacent. So if you want to pause and try the next two, you can. Otherwise, here we go. This is the right angle, so this is the hypotenuse. This is the hypotenuse, and this is the angle. Then next to the angle is the adjacent. And the other one's got to be the opposite. Here, this is the right angle. This looks like it'll be the hypotenuse. Opposite this angle, this is going to be the opposite. And this is adjacent, so that'll be adjacent. So lots of different ways to think about adjacent, opposite, hypotenuse. But all that matters is you get those three whichever way you like. And there you go. That is it for this video. We'll come back and do Socrates some other time. Peace.